Hi there. Plastering today. I just want to. This is a bit of an advice thing. I'm not actually showing you how to do it, but it's to get you going on it basically. What I'm doing here is this is a 1930 semi, and I've stripped out the old what I think is the original fireplace. You know, the awful things made with these awful tiles. And there's some things out of the 1930s have some real appeal, but these old fireplaces just don't. They were just thrown together, it's only really the Victorian and the Edwardian fireplaces that really have some appeal. So what I'm doing is I'm putting a cast iron fireplace in here. And when I took the old fireplace off, there was a bit of gypsum plaster and what have you, and I just thought to myself, I might as well just have the lot off and, start again. So all I've done with this, I've just put one base coat on and, got it flat. There's no scratch coat, float coat. This isn't a 3-coat system. This is a chimney breast, and it's one coat, devil floated. It's actually a natural hydraulic lime. I tend to use Barcelona because it's got a high free lime content. But I always add, even though it's got sort of like around about sort of 40%, 45% free lime, I always chuck in some lime hydrate anyway. Chuck a bucket of that in. It doesn't make any difference whether it's new or old, because I use it mainly to increase workability, because natural hydraulic lime on its own, it's a bit gritty and it's not it's not that workable. And so for the top coat for the plaster, what I'm doing is I've got a bucket here that I mixed up myself. And what I do is I don't do an awful lot of plastering. So what I'll do is I'll mix up a batch of skim. Sometimes I buy, if I'm placing an order, then sometimes I'll place an order for half a dozen tubs of putty skim. But 9 times out of 10 I've got lime putty knocking around, and so what I'll do is I'll add kiln dried sand. Then I can knock my own mixes up as per the job. So if I want sort of like some kind of Regency finish, then I want, it's 1 lime, one kiln dried sand, up to 3 kiln dried sand. So if you want a rustic sponge float, if I'm doing some work in a 17th century cottage, stone built or whatever, then I'll quite happily use a 1 to 3 mix. But if it's something that needs to be sort of quite flat and it's a bit on the Regency side, like a nice townhouse or something, then perhaps a 1 to 1. But like I say, sometimes I buy, sometimes I mix up. The only trouble is I end up with batches that just say like in the marker pen, it just says lime putty skim. So today I've got 2 that I bought, 1 that I made, and I really have no idea where they're from or what they contain, but it doesn't really make any difference because I just knock it up to the consistency that I want and get it on and finish it to the way I want. But one of the things I will share with you is this, right? Excuse me. What I do is I put horsehair, because I just get my horsehair from stables, and I just chop it up, and I just chuck a couple of handfuls in the scratch coat, a couple of handfuls in the float coat. Sometimes I use fibres, but they're really big, thick ones, alkaline resistant fibres that you get from lime suppliers. But what I do with my skim coat, and it's not overly popular because people don't know so much about it, is I use fibres in my skim coat. Now these are very soft, fluffy fibres, and all I'll do is I'll just take a handful and I'll just chuck them in the tub. And what I find is you get a reduction in cracking, and it's easier to skim on, because somehow the fibres enable the trowel to skim across, and so it's just generally easier to put on. And I find that, you know, there's less cracking because there is a certain amount of binding that goes on. So I always recommend, you can get, you know, I get my fibres in bulk. I pick them up from Eat Hotline in Cumbria. I get a big bag of them, and it lasts for ages, you know. But I'm not a plasterer. I don't do an awful lot of plastering, so, you know, if there are any plasterers watching, nothing to see here. On your way, off you go on. You know, I'm going to embarrass myself in front of professional plasterers, because my mainstay really is line pointing. It's what I've always done, you know. I do line plastering, but I don't do it at the commercial level, like day in day out plasterers. You know, if somebody has, you know, something like this, then I'm happy to do that. But, you know, whole houses, you know, complete restorations of period properties, you know, it's not so much my thing. You know, I really just do pointing. But if I can shed a bit of light on how I, as a professional line worker, view line plaster and how I work with it, then it might give you a few insights. So here's the skim. Right, I can't even remember the ratio for that. All I know is that it's line putty. But it says line putty skim on the top of the on the top marker, so that'll do for me. So you can see sort of how sticky it is. You know, I know some people like to turn the hawk completely upside down and for not have any the line more to go anywhere. That's a little bit too stiff for me as far as far as plastering is concerned. So that's kiln dried sand, line putty, and fibres, a good handful. You know, you don't need to start weighing and measuring your fibres or anything. Just chuck them in like you would horsehair. Right, no, just as a point of information, beret for the winter, bandana for the summer. Not that you really needed to know that. But what you do need to know is all about your skimming trowel, because it's not every trowel that you can skim with, because trowels actually have to be broken in. And this is an old Marshalltown trowel, and I've had it ages, and it's great for skimming. And if you press on the side too much, you'll cut you'll cut into the skin really easily, because when you're skimming, what you're actually doing is you're only using the edge of the trowel. So you can see there's, or can you? There's rust and what have you on that, but it doesn't make any difference because you're not skimming with the centre of the, you can see the lightness of that as well, right? Marshalltown do really, really, really light trowels, and if you're on the trowel all day and if you've got something which is literally carrying you off in the wind, that's great, because you know, just a small amount of extra weight will really play on your muscles at the end of the day. So a nice Marshalltown trowel that's been well broken in, because what it does is if you've got a broken in trowel, they say the manufacturers try and sell them broken in, but they never are. And a trowel which hasn't been broken in will leave you lines, right? If it has been broken in, right, then you can skim the finest coat, right, and you won't get any lines. And that basically means you've got to really look after your trowels, really, because if you've got a broken in trowel, the last thing you want to then have to do, if let's say for example, I just take the trowel and I just throw it in the toolbox, in the trowel box, right? That's the single most worst thing you could ever possibly do, because one little nick on this, and every time I skim, it will make a line, right? So once you've got a trowel which is broken, you never ever get it out. It doesn't make any difference how much work you actually do with that trowel, right? You'll never get it out, So then you are relegated to using this, but you're skimming your float coat, because it doesn't make any difference if you get your lines on that. But if you do actually happen to damage a trowel somehow, because the problem is with these things, they do rust, and so if you leave a trowel unoiled for long enough, you'll get rust and you'll get it down the edge, and of course it's ruined, right? So if you do end up with a trowel, a good trowel that's not so good anymore for skimming, you can still use it to put a skim coat on, right? But you can then finish off with a refiner flexi trowel, right? These aren't for applying, right? They're no good for applying. They're not built for it. They are just simply built to skim, right? And you can get them. You can skim on day one with these. There's no need to break in, right? But they are a bit heavier, right? So they're slightly cumbersome in comparison to a Marshall Town trowel that's been well broken in, right? Because even the breaking in it's removing small bits of metal as you go. You get to a point eventually where the best Marshall Town trowel in the world will become unusable, because it just hits that point. They eventually hit that point where they're just too worn down, they're past their sell-by date, and you have to throw them away, right? To the sound of wailing and lamentations, believe me. Right, so you've got your trowel, which is very light. You try not to be carried off in the wind, right? You've got your bucket of skim, whether it's 1 to 1, 1 to 2, or 1 to 3. You can't go any more than 1 to 3. Whether you're choosing to use natural hydraulic lime or lime putty, it's completely up to you. Whether you're going to chuck some fibres in your mix or not, it's completely up to you, right? The next thing to talk about is hawks, right? So you can see this one, really ought to chuck that back in. This one isn't a particularly big one, right? And the reason for that is I'm just doing a little job, right? I'm not going heavy. All I'm going to be doing is just taking a bit off and just putting it on, right? But if you're going large, then you may want a bigger hook. So, that's certainly a bigger hook. It's nice and rough, so your skim stands less chance of sheeting off. This is a Marshall Town one, which means it's well balanced. It's nice to hold, right? And most importantly, it's light, right? Because when you're dealing with lime plaster all day, it doesn't make any difference whether you're pointing or whether you're plastering. On any level, it's heavy, right? So so the thing to do is just have tools which make the job a little bit easier. So you have a table to stand stuff on, because that's very important. And so what we have here is we'll just get rid of that for the minute. Here's one I prepared earlier, right? It's a bucket trowel, right? So there's no point on it, which means that you can just put it in your barrow, put it in your bucket, put it in your truck, whatever, and you will get a nice, lovely dollop of lime plaster like that. I know sometimes you see plasterers with trowels with hooks absolutely loaded up, but at the end of the day, all you're doing when you're skimming is you're just taking a bit. And I know sometimes when you watch plasterers, they're all sort of like, you know, really sort of like banging it on. But at the end of the day, all you really want to be doing is just taking some off your board like that. Okay, so nothing fancy. There's no need to keep doing that, right? But it just means that if you've got a nice blob, all you do is you just take off on the blob and it goes onto the wall, right? So all pretty straightforward. And one last thing, when to actually apply skim on top of a float coat. Some people wait till it's bone dry. You can if you want, but if you know, some people will wait for the full 10 days. You know, they'll do it by the book, full 10 days, bone dry, wet up, apply. Other times, right, you can see, well, that's actually dry, but I've wetted it up. Because I always like to get a good bit of pull in when I'm skimming. So if you've got sort of residual moisture in that second coat, excuse me, then you'll get some pull in. If you haven't got any residual moisture, then put some in. So basically, I spent about, you know, I do go a bit over the top, because what I like to do is I like to really wet a wall up, because I know that if I do, then I've got much more time, because it takes longer for the plaster to go off. So I've got much more time, because lime's very, very forgiving in comparison to gypsum. Right, so, you know, one of these, and just give it a really, really good wet up. I'm happy to stand here for 20 minutes. Any professional plasterers, you pick yourself up from the floor now. Right, I'm quite happy to spend 20 minutes wetting up something like this, right? Because I know that the more moisture I put on, I should say, then the more time I've actually got with my skim coat to mess about with it and play with it. Two things you've got to bear in mind whenever you put any kind of plaster on a wall. It can be a scratch coat, it can be a scratch coat, it can be a float coat, it can be your top coat. You have two things going on. One is hot air rises. Okay, so it doesn't make, so whether you're pointing, whether you're plastering, whatever you put on at the top is going to go off faster than what you put on at the bottom. So sometimes, even with lime, I mean, I know people say like, oh, lime's forgiving and you've got so much time. But on a warm day, right, when you've got a lot of heat in the air and the air is dry, it's risen up and it's sitting around the ceiling. So you put it on and that will go. Right, by the time you get to the base, right, it could be at the point where it's almost ready to be sponge floated. Right, so, and it won't happen at the base because you've got two things going on. Right, one is your hot air is risen, so whatever is at the base is cooler. The floor is always cooler at the ceiling. You know, if you ever have to use a bunk bed, and you like it cool at night, don't have the top bunk. Always have the bottom bunk, or sleep on the floor because it's just cooler. But what you also get is what you call drain down. So you've got gravity pulling the moisture downwards, and it doesn't make any difference whether you're float coating, scratch coating, skimming, whatever's at the base will always take longer to go. So you can effectively find that within about sort of 30 minutes, what's up there has gone. Right, the sponge floating. But what's at the base mightn't, you might be able to, if there are any cracks in it, you will find that you can actually trial them out the next day. Or, sponge float them out, I should say. But it depends on what coat you're using, basically. If you're putting a second coat on and you've got some cracks at the base, it's worth float them out. Anyway, what I'm going to do with this is, because it's a bit of a feature wall, right? There are two words in my vocabulary that I don't like to combine. One is feature and the other is wall. Right? I like a feature wall, right? Step this way and I'll give you a good slapping about, right? Because you should never say that. I hate feature walls, right? But what I'm doing here is actually a feature wall. And what makes it a feature wall is, first of all, I've laid a hearth with cut down 10-inch by 10-inch slate tiles, ribbon, and dyed a bit of grout. I've put a nice hearth down, got the lime here, and I am going to pigment some hot lime wash. So that's going to be the next one. I'm going to show you what. Just wait a minute. In the cast iron fireplace, there's some pale yellow because they kind of look a bit sort of daffodilish, and so the tiles have got some creamy yellow in them. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pigment the lime wash, because I just want that lime wash effect, right? This is never going to go damp. It doesn't actually. It's not built down into any ground containing heaps of moisture. The only benefit to putting lime wash on this is two things. It looks nice, plus the fact, because it's lime mortar and it's going to be lime washed, it'll pull any condensation out of the atmosphere, so it'll be a healthier place to live. Whilst all the, because the ventilation in these places isn't marvelous. Once you start putting in double glazing and what have you, so this is going to be a pigment for the lime wash. So what I'll do is, if you like and subscribe, then you'll get that lime wash video coming up, which my guess is going to be maybe about 5 or 6 weeks. Okay, so any questions? I'm quite amenable to being asked questions, but do me a favour, just don't demand it. Don't demand that I tell you something. Put your manners in. Say please, say thank you, and we'll get on all right. All right, thank you.